Everyone, welcome to this ordinary meeting of the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit. Housekeeping, just that the meeting's being live streamed, Robin, and toilets are out through the door straight ahead, and and I guess out through the exits if there's a fire, and drop cover and hold if there's an earthquake. We'll move to apologies. Do we have any? Haven't had one from Andrew. No. Okay. So no apologies received. Confirm the order of business is in the agenda. Nathan?
Yes.
Thank you. Declarations of interest? None. Public forum? No public forum. Confirmation of minutes of the 15th of March 2024. Move Councillor Courtney, second Councillor Walker. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried. And the minutes of the 3rd of May 2024, which was the hearing, moved Councillor Walker, seconded Councillor Courtney. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Now we'll move to the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit General Manager's Update Report, please, Nathan.
Thank you.
Starting on page
13.
13. Councillors.
Yeah, through the chair, the operations have been going well at the landfill. We have had some incidences, but no real major ones over the last short while. There have been some that have resulted in some injury, let's say, which is not ideal. If we go to the table, you'll see the table of all the different incidences. There was one where a truck driver was opening the tailgate of his truck and a piece of the load fell out and struck him on the leg. It's a risk that we know about. We've been trying to deal with for some time, and this particular contractor, their bins don't open from the side, they open from the centre. They're more like a standard shipping container. So we're trying to work with them over time to get the containers changed. But that's a bit of a long-term project. That contractor also, their bins often or most of the time don't empty properly when they tip, so we end up having to dig them out. So it's another issue that we're trying to deal with. So it's another one was we bought a trailer for all of our safety gear, and unfortunately, when one of the contractors was using that or moving that trailer to hook it onto his ute, the jockey wheel folded over, and it essentially got his arm between it and the trailer drawbar. So that was another unexpected thing. We've looked into it. There's no real further action other than training and trying to make sure that they park it on flat surfaces and have the brake on and all those things that you'd normally do. So mostly training activities. What else is there? I mean, there's a bunch of again largely low level incidences, and we did have one non-compliance event that with the stormwater system. So we had one stormwater. A large rainfall during the period where it was essentially waves of rain came in with quite high intensity, and they filled up the sediment retention pond. And essentially what happened is between the waves, our pond would be decanting. It would still be dirty. We had a failure of some pumps in the dosing system for the chemical treatment. And essentially a plastic bag wrapped around it, but it was late at night, and so the pumps wouldn't actually pump. And so the dosing material wouldn't be in there. So what happened under that scenario is that the creek cleans up quite quickly, and our consent only allows us to discharge up to twice the concentration of the creek. And we were well over that because of a range of activities. So we are looking at what we can do. That may require us to shift the pumps, the dosing pumps further down in the forebay to get them away from the debris. We're also still going through the discussion and the workup with Nelson City Council's compliance team in regard to that. A bunch of projects. So one of the ones you'll be pleased to hear is we have made some progress on the battery bins. And we actually had their first test firing of the battery bins in a quarry recently. The first simulation was a vandalism style of event, so we basically had batteries in the bin, and then someone stuffed in paper through the slot and then chucked in a fire starter, a hemp fire starter, and the battery bin went on fire. Our fire suppression system went off, but it didn't actually work as effectively as we wanted it to. It put the fire out. Well, I believe it put the fire out, but the heat that was maintained inside the battery bin basically, we think, melted the casing of some of the batteries, and then they went on fire. So it then burnt for about 45 minutes, and the batteries did explode and go do their thing as they do. There was no sign of any disturbance outside the battery bin. Obviously it heated up, and you could hear the popping of the batteries, but there was nothing going on. It did scorch the top of the bin. We actually were so happy with that. We thought, wow, that's really good. The outcome is fantastic. We have to do something about the fire suppression system, and we'll have to redesign that a bit. So we thought, let's ramp this up. So we filled up the battery bin a third full with big batteries, like computer laptop batteries and all sorts of other. Well, there's a couple of power tool batteries and a bunch of them in there, and set it off. And that time, we changed the fire suppression system and put a new thing in it. It did the same thing. It put the fire out quickly, but the heat in the system still meant that those batteries cocked off, essentially heat up and went on fire. And because we had so many in there, it burnt for about an hour and a half. There was quite a lot of explosions and stuff inside there. There was a few fireballs came out the little post hole. At the end of the period, there was the bin was again very scorched at the top, but there was literally nothing that had come out. Or we measured the temperature on the outside, and the temperature to get up to about 115 degrees. We're really happy with it. There's a couple of things that we didn't like. One is that the fire suppression system didn't work effectively, so we redesigned that, and we probably need something that uses water rather than a powder, because water will hopefully cool down the bin inside and stop the batteries from actually going on fire. Well, that's the hope. Second piece is that we did have a plastic bin inside, so the system had multiple layers of steel, but the bin inside was plastic, and we think that potentially maybe that went on fire and propagated the fire for longer. So we'll change that out for a metal bin. The third thing we were going to do is change the sign writing, because it scorched all the outside the bin. But if we put the sign writing for the bin on another layer, so like have another air gap between it, it's probably like that like there'd be no damage to the sign writing, and it will further cool down the exterior surface of the bin. So overall, I'm very happy with the outcome. It definitely worked as we were hoping. Not quite, there yet, but getting pretty close. In terms of the other projects, the front buttress project is essentially finished. There's a couple of tidy up works now, a few little bits of grabbling to do. All of the hydro seeding, all that stuff's done. They just look, so really, probably early next week it'll be complete. So I'm very happy with that. It's really good to get that one over. So landfill stability is essentially now well above our safety criteria. So the operations and maintenance contractor the new one is spooling up and doing his plans and stuff. The new compactor has arrived in Nelson, and it's going to be the new compactor has arrived in Nelson. Right. Yep, and it's going to be assembled next week. So the cab gets on and the blade and stuff go on, and then the training is going on. So that's another great outcome. What else? Finances is probably the other thing.
Well, I'll probably get you to pause and
ask questions
up until finances on 24, because we do want to probe the finances a little, if we can. So, Councillor Courtney, we'll start with you.
Righto, thank you very much, and thank you, Nathan, for your report to date at this moment. 3.2, that was the new compactor, and my question was going to be, has it arrived? Are you planning on introducing it or having it working for the new contractor on the 1st of July, or You're going to bring it straight into service?
No, that's essentially the way we've done it is we've purchased that compactor. We actually haven't paid for it yet. We won't pay for it until it's assembled. And then on the 31st of May, the new contractor buys it off us. So we essentially purchased it, we on-sell it to the contractor. That's their machine. They won't start using it until they go on site. So the new contractor will use it on the 1st of July.
So we lease it to the new contractor?
No, we've sold it to them.
Oh, you've sold it. Okay.
Yeah. So the deal hasn't gone through, but part of the requirements of the contract that we've got with them is that they buy it from us.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Another one, if you indulge me, Mr. Chair, was 3.4 when you talk about improved permitting systems resulting in improved management and risk associated with the gas works. What is the improved permitting systems? What is that?
Yeah, so permitting systems on the site are when you're doing a project, you'll have a safety plan. And part of our system is that we'll have a vehicle management plan or we'll have a gas permit. And so what we've done is basically said, in order to do any project that involves accessing, changing, digging into the waste, we expect gas to be there. We have to have the contractor has to have a permit, and that permit has to be signed off by a senior person within the organisation.
Yeah.
In this case, it's either the operations manager, Will, or Mark, and we've basically done that because in the past we've had some what we consider serious incidences that have been related to gas.
Yeah.
Now that is costing us more money because basically what happens is we've implemented a process that says you can't start a job until we've signed off that you're allowed to, that you've put your safe activities in, and you're not allowed to start a job. That permit has to be repeated every day. So in the morning, every day,
yes,
and between every project, right? So you can't. There's not one permit for the day. There's one permit every day for every project.
Okay.
Right. So we consider gas to be one of our highest risks on the site.
Yes.
And we've taken up quite a high level of administrative burden on that to make sure that it is looked after very well.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what that relates to.
Yeah. Well, I'll let Trudy have a turn now. I mean,
Councillor Walker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, and through you, Chair. I guess just a couple of things I kind of want to get a better understanding of. So when we have these health and safety accidents, so we know as a business unit that the contractor's equipment is creating some of those problems. So when it doesn't open the way it should, or I just wonder where we sit with our risk management and whether there's any reputational risk that comes onto us, and how are we mitigating that because it's on our site when these things are happening.
So we, as the principal, hold some risk. I mean, we are actively working with the contractor to try to mitigate that risk. It's not that easy for us to say, sorry, we're not accepting it just like that, because essentially that waste comes from another community. And
so just for clarity, the contractor you're talking about is the contractor that's bringing the waste and not the operator.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
except that happens on our site and it's recorded.
It's our site.
It's recorded on our
system.
records. So we have some ownership over.
We're the principal, right? Essentially, it's our site. We're PCBU because it's our site. We have a contractor that operates our site, right? And in theory, we're not involved on a day-to-day activity. So we're not there. We're not digging it out. But we still are responsible for, to a part, for the fact that an incident could occur on our site. We are ramping up the pressure on both our contractor on site, but also the contractor that brings the waste in from the other community, and to try to change the bins, but B, also the management of those bins and how they open. I mean, and we've tried to do this, and we have a process which we can't always make someone follow. What the process is meant to be that they open the bins and then they basically crack them open. They hook on almost like a dog lead to it, and then they make
Make it
it
so
away
you can see.
and then pull the bin doors open so they're well away from it. But we're not personally there to
That
be
might
able
be
to
better.
inspect that, right? Whereas our,
Thanks.
it would be better if you had a side opening door, so you can crack the door open and essentially let it, and you're standing to the side. But when you've got a shipping container with the doors in the centre, when you're cracking the doors open, you're actually standing by the door. If it opens like this, and there's pressure on the doors will try and push open, so something could fall out. So I'd love to say, no, you can't come to our site. I'd like to do that, but I don't feel that that it's appropriate, given that is essentially would create another community's waste would not be able to be disposed at that point.
Yeah, and I appreciate the explanation. I guess I just sit here wondering if, the incidents that have been reported in today's report are quite minor. If it was a major accident, where do we sit with the liability of the fact that we know that this behaviour happens and we're still allowing it? I don't have a huge risk appetite to sit here and go, I don't want to acknowledge the fact that we're exposed to something that we're aware of. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Right. Well, we do have a meeting, I think, on Monday through Will and with the contractor, I believe.
Well, yeah, they haven't booked it, but we are actively trying to resolve it, push it, and have added some more levers to some sticks to try and make it happen. And I think another reason a lot of these minor, call them indicators, are coming in is I'm seeing it and making it get reported. So I see that as a positive, that we're getting more incidents reported. So from that, we're creating action. So I think.
So on the big one, on that one with the material falling out of the truck, we have given time frames. We've told them that we will start a punitive charge if they don't resolve it. So we'll start ramping up cost. I don't want to do a nuclear option per se, which is you can't come to our site. I want them to resolve it. But I'm totally open if the board chooses to say that to me, to put that in place. But it's not something that we've been.
Well, I'm certainly not giving you a steer to stop them from coming. I just want to make sure that on the governance level that we're mindful and there's a framework in place and a process to keep people safe.
Ultimately the question we ask is, have we done all practical precautions to mitigate that risk? And we are. Obviously that we would have the opportunity of saying no, and that would get rid of that risk. It would eliminate it for us, but it would create other risks, and it wouldn't remove the risk from that activity. It would just go somewhere else. So what we're trying to do is encourage improved behaviours from our own contractor and improved behaviours or improved equipment from the actual contractors delivering to site. We're trying to put timeframes and financial pressures on them to try to get that to happen in a timely fashion.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that response. Thank you also, Will. The other thing that I'd like to ask is, before the change of ownership of this new E520 compactor, would we be able to have a visual on what that looks like? And I know, red tape is not always easy to go onto the actual site, but I'd be quite keen to see the beastie before she goes into someone else's ownership. If you could arrange that, please.
Yeah, that'd be fine. We can go to the contractor's yard where it'll be being assembled, and you can get some. That's no problem. I can deal with that.
Awesome. I'll stop for here, and maybe Aaron.
Do you have anything further, Mel? I've got a few. I just want to give everyone else
couple of important ones, I think. 3.12, and I'd like Officer Nathan to speak to this one, where you say here that the existing operations and maintenance contractor has notified us of several significant variations that will need to be resolved over the next few months. And that includes a penalties dispute of 60,000 and a request relating to scope changes. And scope really frightens me. Scope creep is something that we've got to, it's contagious. We've got to watch that. Changes of up to 150,000. Now, I really do need to know, Nathan, how are you planning to manage this challenge?
Yeah, through the chair. we have a contract. The contract has, when it was tendered, had certain things in it. There's been quite a lot of change. In fact, one of the reasons we changed the operations and maintenance contract was because of the scale of change that is occurring within the industry. So things that have changed are things like we've put in a new wheel wash into the landfill, which washes all the wheels. And the contractor is essentially requesting a variation, as an example, to look after that wheel wash. But what hasn't necessarily been taken into account is the fact that we also previously had a truck wash, and the truck wash is no longer on the site. And so there's a an alternative, to that you could say was a positive on one side and a negative on the other. And there's been quite a lot of those sorts of things occurred. And so what's happening is essentially the contractors going back in time and saying, well, this changed and that changed, and looking for ways of creating additional revenue for themselves before the end of the contract. It's a process that we will have to follow. There's an engineer that will essentially we'll do a counterclaim essentially to saying we'll disagree through the engineer's representative, which is Will, and then that will eventually go to the engineer to make an assessment of what the engineer considers to be reasonable, fair, and it's not. I'm not. In my opinion, a lot of the things that are being requested are not necessarily valid claims, but ultimately the engineer will have to make that judgment.
Final shot.
That's what I feel like it is. Yes, that's essentially trying to.
Councillor Courtney, I'm just sure we got your mind.
Is it a final shot? Is it across the bow?
Yes, I think it's essentially trying to create some additional revenue at the end of the contract for themselves.
And it'll stay at this level of 60,000.
I can't give any commitment to that at all. I mean, that ultimately they can put in claims, and we can dispute those claims, and then ultimately the number will be whatever the number that the engineer decides.
And you're looking to have them tidied up before the new.
That would be our hope.
Contractor comes on.
That would be a hope. Yeah. Yeah. That's not. And I can't guarantee that. Obviously, the engineer will get involved, and that will take some time to resolve. But certainly, they can't put in more claims after the end of the contract. So, yeah.
Right.
Don't they have a period though? Just that they can claim back, or is that not the case?
Yeah. Well, the way the contract works is actually it's got a 1 month period for it. So.
Okay.
So in theory, if they want, they can't go back a long time. It doesn't mean they can't try. Right. So that's part of the process. Again, I'm not taking it personally. It's just one of those things that we're going to deal with. There's a process to go through. If there's something, in my opinion, if there's something that they should have been paid for, it was fair that they were paid for, then we should pay them for it. I mean, there is a question mark around things like that penalty claim. So the contract has in it a penalty. So if they don't achieve the compaction performance, there's a penalty. And so for a long time, we never applied that. When they weren't improving, we started applying the penalty. Similarly, the contract has in it a penalty around if there is no compactor available on the site, there's a charge associated with that. And so when we had a period where we had a number of weeks without a compactor on the site, we applied the penalty. The contract allows for that. And in fact, we even gave them a 50% discount on that penalty at the time, but it was still a very big number. So, I think we can, if we relitigate it, we can take away our generous, deduction from that penalty if we choose to, so it could be a bit messy, but it's just one of those things.
A way to go still.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. It's a process. Yeah.
Right.
Councillor Stallard, do you have any questions, and are you hearing the discussion all right?
Kia ora. Thanks, Chair Bryant. Yes, I can hear everything perfectly well, thank you. And I do have a few questions if I could ask them now.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and thanks so much, Nathan, for this report. First, I wonder, you mentioned that an application has been prepared that might be submitted under the Fast Track Act if that comes to pass. I wonder if you could just speak briefly about the main differences between those two possible pathways a resource consent would take under the existing kind of framework and under Fast Track, and the differences in terms of maybe finances, obviously the time taken, and then also perhaps implications in terms of public involvement and stakeholder satisfaction, or whether the resource would be sectors of the community would have problems with it if it went through the fast track rather than a more conventional consultation and so on.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I first was made aware of this fast track thing through a Tasman District Council inquiry some months ago, where the minister came to Tasman District Council to ask some questions. And at the time, TDC asked whether we had any projects that would be included. So we said, well, we thought that there were 2 projects that we were doing that might meet the criteria. One was the contaminated soil facility, and the second was the new regional landfill for the region. We submitted at that time essentially through a letter from Tasman District Council, and then there was the process has now come out to public, and I felt it was appropriate to formally do that application under the process that was in the public arena at that point in time. So, which is essentially what we've done. Now, to your points. How does the process work? I don't think it will actually save us money. I don't think that's what it's going to be about. What it does do is it potentially increases the speed, and it changes the level of public participation in the activity. And that may be considered positive or negative, depending on your perspective. I mean, certainly the community might consider it negative. One of the things about landfill projects is they are usually very contentious, and they often have a lot of people, angry about the fact that they're going to be put in, in their backyard. And one of the things that that does is it adds to the cost and the emotional, elements of hearing those things. I think the Dunedin one took 10 years thereabouts to get the consent through, if I recall correctly. The fast track would potentially, I'm going to say fast track that process by removing a bunch of the public participation, but it doesn't change or I don't believe it's meant to change the technical expertise applied to and the rigor applied to the process. I mean, technically and scientifically and engineering wise, it should also be analysed very carefully. It just changes the pathway to the public. Well, that's what I've been informed. Now, I'm not an expert on this. The reason I put the submission in is because it basically puts us in a queue, or it puts us on the board. We can choose not to carry on, right? We can always say, no, we put the submission in, but we're not going to do anything further. We can pull it. So it just puts us in a position where we then have the choice to use it or not. Whereas if we don't apply, we would never have had that choice to use it. So that's essentially the methodology or the framework that I'm trying to work on. Now, ultimately it'll be up to this committee to make a decision of whether we did want to run down that path, whether we think that's fair to the community or not. There's quite a lot of water, I think, to go under the bridge for us doing all our geotechnical works at the landfill to make sure that it all stacks up properly before we would actually submit the final AE or anything. And there's quite a lot of work. So the next 2 years is really about developing all of that information.
Thank you. Councillor Stallard.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, 2 sort of follow-up questions. Are we anticipating excuse me, problems if we didn't take the fast track route? If we took the conventional route, does everything look like it will stack up and we'll get to where we need to in time? And secondly, when might be the kind of stop-go decision point on whether to use the fast track process? Is that likely to be this calendar year or some other time?
I can't answer the first question. I don't have enough information to say whether or not we are on, everything's good or not. We're only just starting developing all the information properly. So I at the present time, we are on the assumption we're working toward developing the geotechnical information, and then we'll start moving on to all the other stuff around it. In terms of when we would decide, we can choose to decide. I think the decision for that is a board decision, and it can be made at any time. And it's essentially its decision is, do we believe that it's that we prefer, or do you prefer that the community has its involvement in this in that, and the ability to object or support, as the case may be, or do you believe that the fast track process is appropriate for this? You know, that's a judgment call on your behalf. I mean, I'm open to either way. We do. The reason we've started the consenting process now is that if we were to not get a consent for gullies 2 and 3, and we go through the process and then try it and then don't get it for some reason, we still need time to get a consent for another location. So that's why we're starting early, or we're starting. The benefit that we have is if we were to apply for a consent with a 35-year term, which is what I expect we would do, then the life of the gully 2 and 3 is something like 25 years, which is, you know, if we get a consent early, we still haven't lost the back end consent. So there's no harm in applying for the consent early in that context, as long as we, you know, have a delayed activation of the consent, so that it only starts up essentially. You know, we don't have to have the landfill built before, you know, within 2 years or something. That wouldn't be ideal, but that would be a detail we'd have to work through. Yeah, the consent has a finite life of 35 years maximum that we can get. But the thing is that the landfill life in gullies 2 and 3 would only be 25. So we do have some leeway in the time frame. Yeah.
Thanks for that answer. Yeah, I'll just say at this stage, I certainly have a strong interest in this issue, and I have some concerns. I'm not fixed one way or the other, but I think it's something that needs some careful thought, because we do sidestep some, if we went through the fast track route.
Can I suggest then that we workshop that in August or something after one of the next board meetings, and you know, talk through all of those issues?
That sounds great to me. Thanks, Nathan. If I can continue, Chair Bryant, a couple more. Thank you. Item 10, new deed of agreement in terms of reference look to be close to be delivering after TDC indicate they'll be approving them soon. What implications would those revised documents have for this business unit and the governance board?
There's a bunch of streamlining of activities in there, which there's also changes some of the reporting timeframes and stuff for us, which, I mean, basically it is to try to make it more consistent with some of the other things that I do with my regional sewerage business unit hat. It also sort of streamlines some of the reporting responsibilities for myself, and how I report into council or into the board. I don't know. There's a bunch of things in it that we've been that have been modified. There is no specific change that's, you know, the biggest change I think from a board's perspective is the fact that it clarifies what has been a bit of a grey area around the delegations of the board, and it's just an improvement on the you know, the terms of reference in the memorandum of understanding have some, you know, ambiguities in the way that they're worded.
Thank you. So would it be appropriate that those changes would sort of be an agenda item to discuss at an upcoming meeting once the deed of agreement and terms of reference have been formally approved?
I'm happy to do that if you would like to do that.
Okay, thanks. And just two more. Quickly, just for request for information, I wonder if you could send to elected members a summary of the capital costs of the gas capture system, and then what we're saving year by year via reduced ETS obligations.
Yep.
If you could just, I guess essentially I just wanted to see, when's the payback on that investment? Has it already happened? Will it happen in 3 years' time? And that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that something you can do, or is that?
Oh, no, I'll work with Andrew and do it. Let's happily do that. It's no problem. I would expect that we've already saved more than we've spent. We probably did that in the first year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And just finally, oh, sorry, I cut you off. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm happy to do that for you, Aaron. It's no problem.
Thanks so much. And finally, could you just briefly speak to the instability that's been identified in the, I think it was in the back of the landfill?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Are you talking about the buttress?
No, there's a slip that's activated.
Oh,
so when we've been developing or doing the buttress, we obviously dig out we've been digging out dirt from behind the landfill and creating more air spaces that we're trying to get to, get wind and two benefits from the same activity. And doing that, we bench back into the spurs that come into the site. So we're basically creating more airspace by digging off the base of the spur. And when we've done that, the geotechs have thought that the material was all good on that spur. We had 3 different geotechnical experts come onto the site to look at it, and all of them were okay. And then what's actually happened is that they found that there's a very fine mudstone layer that's actually in one of those things that was not visible by the eye, but when it got wet in one of the storm events recently, it actually wet up that mudstone layer, and that lubricated it. And so we'd taken a lot of weight off the bottom of the side of the hill, and then that's allowed the material to start sliding down the hill. So it's a fairly significant amount of material, something like 10,000 tons. It's not a major. We've now, in the context, we've now put some dirt back at the bottom of it to hold it back in place. We've cut off the water from around the top of it. We've put in, we've obviously, that's cost us some money, but probably the value of the airspace is probably worth quite a lot more than the money we spent on fixing it. So, so yes, it's a problem. I mean, it's not ideal, but it wasn't predicted, and it's an unforeseen event. So.
Thank you.
That's all from me. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor Stallard, Councillor Courtney, and then we might come to yourself.
Thank you very much. Another one that I really want some explanation from you on is 19.2, that you draw attention to the fact that the period
Starting to go on to finance.
That's a finance one. I was going to.
Yeah, okay, right, I'll go off that. But there was something else here I wanted to ask you about. The current contractor was, I think it was 7.7. Reference in your report, initial contraction design and cost assessments.
So that was for the temporary transfer facility that we've been looking at. Yeah,
yes.
So we've actually been struggling with that facility. It's one of the few projects that we've had that's gone around. It's gone around in circles, and part of the reason it's gone around in circles for us is that we're trying to mitigate risk, right? And so part of the risks that we're trying to mitigate are health and safety risks associated with vehicle-on-vehicle incidents or vehicle-on-people incidences, and also we're trying to mitigate risks around environmental, mud on the roads and various other pieces. One of the designs the initial design we had vehicles tipping on a big pad plus a small ramp for the smaller vehicles to tip off, and so that design was costed up by the existing operations contractor and by their existing staff, and then they had it reviewed by one of their other staff who had been on the site and had a lot longer experience on the site, who said, no, this won't work because of X, Y, and Z. I was like, So then we sort of have to go back to the drawing board again. And so each time we look at a design, we keep coming up with another risk, or the risk profile keeps changing. So as an example, if we tip off an edge, we improve the vehicle-on-vehicle incident risk, but we introduce a working at heights risk. And we've been struggling with the idea of what hierarchy of risks we have, and if we're introducing one risk, what is the most critical or the highest risk, and how do we do that? And it's been difficult, because what we're trying to do is actually eliminate risks, but each time we go in a different direction, it starts to get, so we're now. In order to get the facility in place by the 1st of July, because we have a contractual obligation to do so, we're going to be building in 2 stages system now. We'll basically separate out and we'll build one that manages all of the surrounding risks, like working heights, because it just doesn't deal with them. There is no heights. But we'll end up having some sort of traffic light system and some big flat pad on which they tip, and then just be having to manage the vehicle movements very carefully. What I worry about in that process is that we won't learn anything for the future. So this coming year, we'll be looking at trying to design and build the permanent transfer facility. and we would expect to have an edge or a tipping bay and an edge in that. And so the part of the problem we have is we only do the temporary one on a flat pad. We don't learn anything from that process that we can apply in, the site-specific stuff that we can apply to the future. And so hence I've broken it into two bits, get it going, and then it gives us a bit more time to really dig into the design and the safety aspects and that hierarchy of safety. It's not ideal. I'm rather frustrated by the process because we have literally gone around the loop and got back to the beginning a couple of times. And that's really annoying.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're persevering. That's the
absolutely.
main
Yeah. And we will do something and we'll get to a good outcome. It's just, it's just going to take us more time, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Most of you have asked some of the questions. I was going to around them, but I do have a few more if I may, Nathan. So firstly, just Councillor Courtney asked about the new compactor.
Mm-hmm.
Is that COD on delivery for the contract, or do they have a payment plan to pay for that?
Basically, the way the contract was set up is we obviously, the board agreed that we would buy the compactor and that the intent was that we would on-sell it. So when we set up the new operations and maintenance contract, one of the key aspects of that contract was that as a requirement of tender, the contractor would buy it off us. And the date on which that will occur was the 31st of May this year.
24.
Yeah. So essentially, that may not occur on the 31st of May. I mean, we're only going to pay for it if it is fully assembled and working. So we're not going to pay for it, because the way it works is we pay for it and then they pay it. The contractor pays us for it. So essentially, they're buying a second-hand machine. It's never been run, but we will only pay for it when it's fully assembled and demonstrated that it's actually meeting its criteria. And if that takes longer than the 31st of May, then we would obviously not be asking the contractor to buy it from us until that time.
Right,
so that would be all it would be is a contract notice that would go back and forth. We expect that and now my understanding is that the company who supplied it, they have staff on site next week, and they will be assembling and doing training next week. So we're expecting that the transactions will occur this month.
Excellent, thank you. And then just to follow up on Councillor Walker's point, and I think that may well be an opportunity for some media publicity as well for the new contractor if they so wish, and just for this unit that we're supplying a new compactor to get better compaction and all of those things.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And we could have Councillor Trinity sitting on the compactor.
Yeah,
that would be
would like
I think so.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
with a hard hat.
yeah. All the safety.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that for you to organise in your capable hands, but
Yeah, no, that's fine.
and then just in relation to the fast track, we've actually applied. When are we likely to hear back if we're accepted for the fast track? Because I'm just wondering how this goes.
Well, my understanding is that the legislation hasn't actually been passed.
Oh, right, we've already applied.
The application process has come out, but the legislation, I don't exactly know when that will go through government. But it hasn't gone through. So we won't hear until after that's gone through, obviously.
So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? Do we go down the fast track or the standard consenting route and making a judgment call which one to go with and when to go?
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately it comes back to the board's choice in that. I'm totally open either way. I mean, if we didn't do the application, that we don't have the choice to go the fast track.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
And if that legislation comes, that could take to the end of this calendar year before we even hear.
Correct.
Yeah. So, are you doing any work on the application that's for either preliminary work? Or?
Yeah. So we've had a drilling rig into the Gully 3 and Gully 2, and we're expecting hopefully by August or maybe by that date when we start sitting around the table, we might have a preliminary geotechnical report. So we've already started work on it. Next year we have the bulk of our money, the $750,000 in the budget for developing the consenting document in the AEX. So we're working towards that rapidly.
Right. And then just Councillor Stallard had the question about the legal situation. As I understand it, I'm not sure if TDC agrees. I'm not sure that we'll want to come back to this committee and relitigate it all, because isn't it to align them?
Yes, I mean, I don't think it's, well, Councillor Stallard can correct me. I don't think that he was suggesting we're relitigating. I think he's more talking about what it now means and how that,
Right.
making sure that
He's nodding, so that's good. Yeah.
All the board members are understanding what it means.
Right. Excellent. So for me to say, unless there's any more on any of the other things, we'll move to the monetary.
I just have one on 15.5. Nathan, emissions trading scheme position.
Right.
And there you say we're currently holding 94,737 units more than the policy.
That's correct.
Now, have you got plans for that? Are you going to surrender some, or what's the process?
Each year
there?
we surrender, right? We surrender something around 7,000. Well, this year 7,300, something in that order.
To do something similar. Eh?
Well, we only surrender when we have to, because obviously surrendering them is basically giving away money. So those are worth money. We hold 94,000. Well, we hold 141,000 credits, and the board has previously authorised me to sell 50,000 at my discretion. I'm choosing not to at this present time because the price isn't appropriate for selling. There's still a lot of uncertainty in the ETS market. We don't exactly know what the current government is going to do fully yet. There's now a new consultation document come out that's looking at the settings for the ETS over the next few years. So I don't think it's appropriate to sell yet. And if we are going to sell, we want to sell when the price is high, right? Rather than when the price is depressed. So, that's where I'm sitting at the present time.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, now perhaps Nathan, if you'd like to give us some commentary on the financial situation. I'm not sure if Andrew wants to add anything, and then we'll open that up for questions.
So the finances have been tight this year.
So starting on page 24, councillors.
Yeah. So yes, the finance has been tight this year. The revenue has been down compared to what we might have thought it would be. It is just on budget, slightly under for gas sales. Costs are roughly the same, but where we've got overspend on the operations aspects of the contract, we've gained on some of the ETS accruals. So in aggregate, we are $14,000 ahead of budget. The issue that I'm raising in the report is that the trend is the wrong way. Right, so the trend is that last time we were 300,000 above budget. Now we're 14,000 above budget. At the end of the year, we could be 250,000 below budget, and unfortunately, there's a large amount of that depends on the finance on the waste coming in, which we have no control over. Last month was actually above budget, so while previous months had been below budget, we were above budget. So that we had 100,000 more revenue than budget last month, which was the first time in some time that had occurred. So maybe the trend will dip out and we won't have that. I don't know the answer. It also we have to be aware that some of the financial costs that we've incurred in the operations costs are things like the new operations and maintenance contract, the development of that, the consulting, the lawyers, etc., being involved in that. So those are all in that operation. There's a bunch of that in there. There's been some other spending on things in the operations contract that we wouldn't necessarily normally spend on, and so that's why that is up compared to what we'd normally see. So that will cease at the end of this financial year with the new contract coming into play.
Councillor Courtney.
Thanks for that, Nathan. I think it was something we've got to take seriously. My attitude has always been you move quickly. You look at your costs.
Yeah.
You look at a whole raft of different things. Now, there is a degree of urgency about this, I think. There has to be from us all. because you do say in here there's been a significant drop in volume, and thank goodness Councillor Aaron isn't here at the moment because
I see you're on Zoom.
I know he is. I know he is. But I'm saying, is some of it related to the fact that we're pending a possible fees increase? That's one thing, you see. But that's so. No. Well, I think we should be looking at our costs, efficiencies, all of those sorts of things that relate to a well-run business, and I think we should be doing it with urgency, having a look at all aspects of it.
Through the chair, I haven't done the numbers. It would be within a few percent of our, of the target would be where we will end up. Will be within a few percent of where we intended to be. So we're not.
That's the waste you're talking about, is it?
No, in terms of the actual budgets. So even if we run a negative of $300,000 or $400,000, we're still within a few percent of our target. And the thing that we may find, often we do find, is that the swing we get at the end of the year when we do our accounting adjustments is that it could be significantly more or less than that. I mean, Andrew can talk to that because we have our post-closure cost adjustments and there's a bunch of changes to depreciation or interest rates that make a much bigger change than $200,000 or $300,000. I'm not that concerned about the thing. It's just that the fact is that the trend is the wrong way, right? And that's why I'm alerting to you. We may end up with a deficit larger than the deficit we planned to have. And I think that's an important point to say. We planned to have a deficit. We have money in the bank that we made a surplus. And we actually have to, we're not allowed to hold money. We're not allowed to make profits. So we're trying to run zero. And this last year we ran, 910,000 up or something. This year we're going to be running slightly down. It's all dependent on the waste flows. Now, I'm warning. I'm just outlining that that the trend is the wrong way. We're likely to go into deficit. I don't think that's a major issue. I mean, Andrew can talk to that. But should we tighten our belt? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yes. Yep. Good. Well, you see, when you tell me if revenue is down, red flag. When you say to me in your report the landfill waste volumes have significantly dropped, you've got your revenue, you've got your product coming in.
Yeah.
And so therein lies a challenge.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear what Andrew has to say.
Well, one of our problems is a lot of our fixed costs, or a lot of our costs are fixed. So we, tightening the belt is you can do it, but it doesn't make as much change as you think it might do. Anyway, Andrew.
Andrew, do you want to respond to Councillor Courtney's each councillor's questions as we go along? Is probably best. Yeah.
Probably best. Yeah, I think we're almost looking at a game of two halves so far. The beginning of the financial year, we were saved by the receipt of some hail material. As Nathan pointed out, we are exposed to the market and just the economy and also any effectiveness of waste minimisation. The quid pro quo is if we don't get the volume in, we've got that improves our airspace availability. So, it's a double-edged sword. Then what's happened over the last probably 6 months is that volumes have been lower. And this is what Nathan has alerted you to, because our fixed costs are significant. The biggest expense is the local disposal levy of $6 million out of a total revenue of 16. So, it's well over a third of our costs are fixed. So Nathan's just giving you a heads up that it might look bad at the end of the year relative. That's nothing unusual in the big scheme of things. We have to estimate what the volumes are going to be. Over the last couple of financial years, we had been too conservative, and so we tweaked that a wee bit, and then you could say that at the end of March, we've actually got it right.
You could say that.
You could say that. It's very close, but it's made up of that savings we got with that additional hail material and offsetting the reduction in general waste, particularly construction waste, because that's economic activity related. So in the big scheme of things, it's actually, if we ended up a $300,000 deficit, that's not actually significant given our turnover or our history. And what we do is we adjust the future fee recoveries to if we have over recovered, we pass it back over a period of time, and if we've under recovered, we recover over a period of time. So it's you can't just look at this small period of time and overreact.
Yeah,
I
so
think we do have to obviously run the landfill as efficiently as we can, and given the constraints of the existing O&M contract, we have been exposed to additional costs because of the, well, dare I say, inadequacies of that or the changes in the environment. So I think Nathan's covered all the points. I'm not particularly concerned by them.
Yeah, I think
we have had savings in the ETS, which has been our saviour. The fact that we've captured so much gas and reduced our costs from what was budgeted both last year and this year, that's been very significant.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. And one word that I was really impressed and pleased you mentioned was efficiencies, because this is the time when you look closely at those, don't you?
I think you should always be looking at that.
Yeah.
For the chair, to expand on one of Andrew's points, I mean, one thing we had done, and I think it's an important point, is that every year we do an assessment when we're preparing the business plan of what our our expected waste flows are, what all of our costs should be, and then we put that together. And this year, you could say we got it wrong, only by a bit, but a little bit in this counts. The last few years we've been putting it in and we've assumed a certain amount of waste flow, and we were making a surplus each year, but too much surplus. And so we were assuming too much waste flow was coming in. So we adjusted that waste flow this year. But unfortunately, that also coincided with a downturn in the economy. And if everything had been going right, the way it used to be going, it might well have been, about being on. But unfortunately, we adjusted the waste flows expected at the same time as the waste flows actually dropped down. And so that had sort of a double-edged, or two factors coming together and working in the wrong way. Again, how far we went and the effect of it isn't actually that significant. As I said, last year we made, I think 910,000 profit, if I'm correct, profit surplus, I should be saying. We budget to pay that back over the life of the landfill. And then the year before that, we actually had, another surplus. But then, so there's, what we were trying to do is budget for removing that surplus by the end of the life of the landfill. We had intentionally put in the AMP, or the long-term plan, an expectation that we would use $500,000 of surplus each year to remove some of the hump in our costs coming forward. And so what this might do is have an adverse effect on how much money we have available for that for that hump in the future. We may end up having to put the price of the landfill gate fee up slightly to accommodate that change, because we won't still have the surplus we potentially thought we'd have.
I think, Mr. Chair, the answer is we look forward, don't we, to the sale of bottled gas in the future to increase our
we'll
revenue.
come to that in a while. I think we'll keep moving on though. Councillor Walker, did you have some questions?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Well, I gave you a promotion there. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because we have to do a bit of crystal ball gazing. We sit here making assumptions and assuming what our waste management volumes are going to be, and yet none of us know when the next weather event's going to come. Because that, you know, we only need one little bit of a weather event here in our local region, and the dice rolls in a completely different way. I acknowledge that the ETSs are our saving grace, and I also acknowledge that we change our recovery fees based on what our bottom line looks like at the end of our financial year. But I guess my question is, having had all this corridor this morning, Andrew, do you feel secure, safe and comfortable, as do you, Nathan, with what our bottom line is going to look like? And can the story that we continue to share with our community be a comfortable one where we're not at risk?
Andrew, you go first. I think we'll need to just keep our answers quite
I'm quite
concise because we're
comfortable.
starting to lose a bit of time.
Comfortable, yeah. I think we've got a good story to tell about what we've been doing. We are exposed to the real world out there, the economic realities of life. At the moment, it's tracking okay. And we are going to get variation. We have to estimate volumes, the same as councils have to estimate water volumes, for example. You know, you get a dry summer, your sales go through the roof. If you get a wet summer, you don't. We're exposed to those same variations, different triggers for it. But last year we made $500,000 accounting profit. The year before it was $2 million. So, you know, if we end up making a $300,000 loss in the big scheme of things, we were budgeting $90,000 loss, use of that previous surpluses. But Nathan did touch, there is some accounting changes to come when we look at post-closure cost at the end of the year, and that all depends on discount rates provided by the Reserve Bank and how that moves. You'll be a brave person at 6 weeks out to tell me what you think interest rates would be on the 30th of June.
Yeah. Am I comfortable? I mean, I'm never comfortable when we're looking like we're running negative. You know, I don't like that. I mean, having been in business before, that always feels uncomfortable. That being said, you know, for myself, I have a sort of a threshold I apply, and I'm saying, am I within a tolerance? And the answer is I'm within the tolerance I give myself at the moment for, is the business being run well? It doesn't remove Councillor Courtney's perspective. We need to be efficient. We need to make sure the belt is tight. We need to be keeping a focus on cost. You know, that being said, and I totally agree with all of that stuff, we also need to spend the right amount of money to do it properly, right? So, you know, there's constraints that we'll work within balancing.
Is that all, Councillor Walker? Councillor Stella, do you have anything relating to financial before myself?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just a couple of questions from myself around this. Just looking at the spreadsheet, I'm just curious why the operations of the landfill at York Valley increased 50,000 over budget in 1 month and $500,000 in the full year.
Right.
That seems quite a lot of money over a full year.
Yeah. So, as an example, last year we were $3 million over budget. So 900,000 is way better than last year in that context. And the reason for that was that we dug a lot of landfill airspace last year, and we've done similarly this year. So airspace isn't a capitalised item. Well, I've made $9 million worth of airspace this year, but we've spent some money doing that. So it sits inside the budget as it's not an unbudgeted item. Okay, so that's one of the pieces. Another piece is that there are, you know, we've spent the better part of $250,000 getting the tender and all of the work's done for that. sits inside our operations costs.
You're right. That's what I thought
Right.
it might be. Yep.
Similarly, we have some activities like gas permitting, like our traffic manager that we pay for every month. So there's another $100,000 sitting around the traffic management controls that are extra to the contract. So there's bunches of things sitting there. It's $900,000 over. It's not ideal because it would be nice to have had all those in the budget per se, but we don't, and hence that just looks bigger. We have compensated by the ETS gains and the other elements. So, on balance, we're about, we're close to budget. We're again within the tolerance, aggregating altogether. It's within my tolerance. I'm okay with that.
And I guess the other thing that was alluded to earlier on, the two levies we have to pay are quite substantial, and we don't really have a choice around them.
No.
As much as I'd like to have a choice.
No, about 80% of our costs are outside of our control, and to some extent.
And similarly, Andrew, depreciation, are we charging that at the right rate against the accounts, or is there any option to look at that? I'm asking the accountant and you.
The timing of CapEx makes a significant thing, particularly at this stage of the landfill. We've been fixing up the landfill since it was taken over, and what we're spending at the moment on the upgrades, that arguably some of which should have done earlier, now going to need to be recovered over a shorter period of time. So there is a hit that hasn't been recognised here yet, but it's not a cash hit.
Right. Yeah. And that's the same. Without the depreciation, our cash difference would be, our cash surplus would be just about in surplus without depreciation.
Certainly it is, because of we've got all those ETS credits sitting in the bank.
Yeah. And then I guess my final question is, both councils are close to finalising their LTP. Is there any need for us to look at changing the charges going forward, or we're comfortable with what we put out will be satisfactory for the year ahead?
No, we've signed off the LTP in the 3rd of May meeting as final for us. We don't intend to change that. The business plan has also been signed off for the 24-25 year. So there's no intended changes. What will happen is that, this happens to us in both business units. We'll have to analyse at the 1st of July or the 30th of June what interest rates are and what all those things and how they apply to us. And so there might be changes that occur that won't be included in the budget because we've set the budget some time ago. But then those things will get updated on that date because that's what they are on that date. So that's just the process that we go through. As an example, the regional sewage business unit at the moment is having a lot of financial issues around the fact that the interest rates have changed significantly last year between the budget and when we set the finances. And so there's been quite a significant change. We haven't had that issue here, but it is a risk that can occur. I'm not, as I say, I'm quite comfortable with where we are. The new contract that we have for the operations and maintenance contractor is a slightly different contract. It basically is it's more like we pay the contractor for what he does, but we incentivize him to only do a certain amount, or the least he can reasonably do. And so we're hoping that will result in efficiencies as we move forward. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And do you want to add anything, Andrew? Thank you. So thank you for the report. If there's nothing further from anyone, is someone prepared to move the resolution to receive the report? Move Councillor Walker, seconded Councillor Courtney. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary? Thank you. To the contrary, resolution is carried. Thank you. Well, next, is that the only open agenda item, Robin? It is. So do we need to move into committee now, do we? Yeah, okay. Is someone happy to move? Move councillor Courtney, seconded councillor Walker. Oh, Stellan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Resolution is carried. We're now in committee. Yeah, we'll just have a few minutes. Adjourn. Oh, well, we won't start for a minute. David, was you indicating whether it's you can stay? You should be fine.